literature reviews on emotion, and sociality course papers. The 15th of February 2021. Paper, Affective Computing R. W. Picard, 1995, AM.I.T Media Laboratory Perceptual Computing Section Technical Report Number 321. https://effect.media.mit.edu/pfs/95.picard.pf https://effect.media.mit.edu/pfs/95.picard.pf Inspiration. Affect refers to the feelings we experience as part of our everyday lives. As our day progresses, we may find ourselves feeling happy or sad, jealous or grateful, proud or embarrassed. We experience affect in the form of mood and emotions. Mood refers to the positive or negative feelings that are in the background of our everyday experiences. Most of the time, we are in a relatively good mood, and positive mood has some positive consequences. It encourages us to do what needs to be done, and to make the most of the situations we are in. Eisen, 2003. When we are in a good mood, our thought processes open up, and we are more likely to approach others. We are more friendly and helpful to others when we are in a good mood than when we are in a bad mood, and we may think more creatively. Drew, Bars, and Newstead, 2008. On the other hand, when we are in a bad mood, we are more likely to prefer to remain by ourselves rather than interact with others, and our creativity suffers. Emotions are brief, but often intense, mental and physiological feeling states. In comparison with moods, emotions are shorter-lived, stronger, and more specific forms of affect. Emotions are caused by specific events, things that make us, for instance, jealous or angry, and they are accompanied by high levels of arousal. Whereas we experience moods in normal, everyday situations, we experience emotions only when things are out of the ordinary or unusual. Emotions serve an adaptive role in helping us guide our social behaviors. Just as we run from a snake because the snake elicits fear, we may try to make amends with other people when we feel guilty. Human behavior flows from three main sources: knowledge, emotion, which is an awakened state, and desire, which is a particular state, for example patience, with respect to time, and hope, when creating something. Plato. Affective computing is the study and development of systems and devices that can recognize, interpret, process, and simulate human effects. Mood refers to the positive or negative feelings that are in the background of our everyday experiences. Most of the time, we are in a relatively good mood, and positive mood has some positive consequences. It encourages us to do what needs to be done, and to make the most of the situations we are in. Eisen, 2003. Human behavior flows from three main sources: knowledge, emotion, which is an awakened state, and desire, which is a particular state, for example patience, with respect to time, and hope, when creating something. Plato. Most of the time, we are in a relatively good mood, and positive mood has some positive consequences. It encourages us to do what needs to be done, and to make the most of the situations we are in. Eisen, 2003. When we are in a good mood, our thought processes open up, and we are more likely to approach others. Overview. Computers are beginning to acquire the ability to express and recognize affect, and may soon be given the ability to have emotions. The essential role of emotion in both human cognition and perception, as demonstrated by recent neurological studies, indicates that affective computers should not only provide better performance in assisting humans, but also might enhance computers' abilities to make decisions. This paper presents and discusses key issues in affective computing, computing that relates to, arises from, or influences emotions. Models are suggested for computer recognition of human emotion, and new applications are presented for computer-assisted learning, perceptual information retrieval, arts and entertainment, and human health and interaction. Affective computing, coupled with new wearable computers, will also provide the ability to gather new data necessary for advances in emotion and cognition theory. Reading emotions through effective computing. Rosalind Picard, Future of Storytelling 2014. The 14th of February 2021 notes. Emotion Wheel. https://miro.medium.com/max/10801 https://miro.medium.com/max/10801 Theories about emotions. Theories about emotions. The Emotions Wheel, Feelings Will Explain. Charles Digital Storytelling Session. https://www.youtube.com/v=4ZNKHZWV270 https://www.youtube.com/v=4ZNKHZWV270 Limbic Perception. Synesthetes may feel shapes on their palms as they taste, or see colors as they hear music. Synesthetic experiences behave as if the senses are cross-wired, as if there are not walls between what is seen, felt, touched, smelled, and tasted. However, the neurological explanation for this perceptual phenomenon is not merely crossed wires. Cytarix studies point to a corresponding increase in activity in the limbic system, which lies physically between the brain stem and the two hemispheres of the cortex, and which has traditionally been assumed to play a less influential role than the cortex, which lies above it. The limbic system is the seat of memory, attention, and emotion. The studies during episodes of synesthesia indicate that the limbic system plays a central role in sensory perception. Izzard, in an excellent treatise on emotion theory 3, also describes emotion as a motivating and guiding force in perception and attention. Leidelmeijer 4 goes a step further in relating emotions and perception. Once the emotion process is initiated, deliberate cognitive processing and physiological activity may influence the emotional experience, but the generation of emotion itself is hypothesized to be a perceptual process. Thinking-feeling axis. The limbic role is sometimes considered to be antithetical to thinking. The popular Myers-Briggs type indicator has a thinking versus feeling as two endpoints of one of its axes for qualifying personality. People are quick to polarize thoughts and feelings as if they were opposites. But, neurologically, the brain draws no hard line between thinking and feeling. Authorities in neuroanatomy have confirmed that the hippocampus is a point where everything converges. All sensory inputs, external and visceral, must pass through the emotional limbic brain before being redistributed to the cortex for analysis, after which they return to the limbic system for a determination of whether the highly transformed, multi-sensory input is salient or not. Non-limbic emotion and decision-making. Although the limbic brain is the home base for emotion, it is not the only part of the brain engaged in the experience of emotion. The neurologist DiMaggio, in his book, Descartes LX6 identifies several non-limbic regions which affect emotion, and surprisingly, its role in reason. Most adults know that too much emotion can wreak havoc on reasoning, but less known is the recent evidence that too little emotion can also wreak havoc on reasoning. Years of studies on patients with frontal lobe disorders indicate that impaired ability to feel yields impaired ability to make decisions. In other words, there is no real reason with sex. Emotions are vital for us to function as rational decision-making human beings. I must emphasize at this point that by no means should anyone conclude that logic or reason are irrelevant. They are as essential as the laws I described earlier. However, we must not marginalize the role of the sons. The neurological evidence indicates emotions are not a luxury. They are essential for rational human performance. Belief in a pure reason is a logical howler. In normal human cognition, thinking and feeling are mutually present. If one wishes to design a device that thinks in the sense of mimicking a human brain, then should it both think and feel? Let us consider the classic test of a thinking machine. The Turing test. The Turing test examines if, in a conversation between a human and a computer, the human cannot tell if the computer's replies are being generated by a human, say, behind a curtain, or by the machine. The Turing test is considered a test of whether or not a machine can think, in the truest sense of duplicating mental activity, both cortical and limbic. One might converse with the computer about a song or a poem or describe to it the most tragic of accidents. To pass the test, the computer responses should be indistinguishable from human responses. Although the Turing test is designed to take place communicating only via text, so that sensory expression, example, voice intonation, and facial expression, does not play a role, emotions can still be perceived in text, and can still be elicited by its content and form. Clearly, a machine will not pass the Turing test unless it is also capable of perceiving and expressing emotions. Hence, a test that would ordinarily study a human-human interaction is used to study a human-computer interaction. In these experiments, they have repeatedly found that the results of the human-human studies still hold. Their conclusion is that individuals' interactions with computers are inherently natural and social benign. Since emotion communication is natural between people, we should interact more naturally with computers that recognize and express affect. The effective piano teacher. One of the interests in the Media Lab is the building of better piano teaching computer systems, in particular, systems that can grade some aspects of a student's expressive timing, dynamics, phrasing, etc. 11. This goal contains many challenges, one of the hardest which involves expression recognition, distilling the essential pitches of the music from its expression. Recognizing and interpreting effect in musical expression is very important, and I'll return to it again below. But first, there is an even more important component. This component is present in all teaching and learning interactions. Imagine you are seated with your computer piano teacher, and suppose that it not only reads your gestural input, your timing and phrasing, but that it can also read your emotional state. In other words, it not only interprets your musical expression, but also your facial expression and perhaps other physical changes corresponding to your feelings. Imagine it has the ability to distinguish even the three emotions we were all born with: interest, pleasure, and distress at 12. Given effect recognition, the computer teacher might find you are doing well with the music, and you are pleased with your progress. Am I holding your interest? It would consider. In the affirmative, it might nudge you with more challenging exercises. If it detects your frustration and many errors, it might slow things down and give you encouraging suggestions. Detecting user distress, without the user making mechanical playing errors, might signify a moving requiem, a stuck piano key, or the need to prompt for more information. Quintessential emotional experience. Dr. Barry Ford, a mentor of children exploring and constructing scientific worlds on the musical, and a volunteer for nearly a decade in the discovery room of the Boston Museum of Science, says that learning is the quintessential emotion. A learning episode might begin with curiosity and fascination. As the learning task increases in difficulty, one may experience confusion, frustration, or anxiety. Learning may be abandoned because of these negative feelings. If the learner manages to avoid or proceed beyond these emotions, then progress may be rewarded with an aha and accompanying neuropeptide rush. Court says his goal is to maximize intrigue, the fascinating stage, and to minimize anxiety. The good teacher detects these important cues and responds appropriately. For example, the teacher might leave subtle hints or clues for the student to discover, thereby preserving the learner's sense of self-propelled learning. Enthusiasm is contagious in learning. The teacher who expresses excitement about the subject matter can often stir up similar feelings in the student. Thus, in the above piano teaching scenario, in addition to the emotional expression in the music and the emotional state of the student, there is also the effect expressed by the teacher. Computer teaching and learning systems abound, with interface agents perhaps providing the most active research area for computer learning. Interface agents are expected to be able to learn our preferences, much like a trusted assistant. However, in the short term, like the dog walking the person and the new boots breaking in your feet, learning will be two-way. We will find ourselves doing as much adapting to the agents as they do to us. During this mutual learning process, wouldn't it be preferable if the agent paid attention to whether we were getting frustrated with it? For example, the agent might notice our response to too much information as a function of valence, pleasure, displeasure with the content. Too many news stories tailored to our interests might be annoying, but some days, there can't be too many humor stories. Our tolerance may be described as a function not only of the day of week or time of day, but also of our mood. The agent, learning to distinguish which features of information best please the user while meeting his or her needs, could adjust itself appropriately. User-friendly and personal computing would move closer to their true meanings. Centric modulation. There is a class of qualities which is inherently linked to the motor system. It is because of this inherent link to the motor system that this class of qualities can be communicated. This class of qualities is referred to commonly as emotions. In each mode, the emotional character is expressed by a specific subtle modulation of the motor action involved which corresponds precisely to the demands of the centric state. Manfred Klein's 14. 6. Assentic is from the Latin sentire, the root of the words a sentiment and a sensation. Poker face, poker body. The level of control involved in perfecting one's poker face is praised by society. But, can we perfect a poker body? Despite her insistence of confidence, you hear fear in her voice. Although he refuses to cry in your office, you see his eyes twitching to hold back the flood. I spot the lilt in your walk today, and therefore expect you are in a good mood. Although I might successfully conceal the nervousness in my voice, I am not able to suppress it throughout my body. You might find evidence if you grab my clammy hand. Although debate persists about the nature of the coupling between emotion and physiological response, most writers accept a physiological component in their definitions of emotion. Lazarus et al. 15 argue that each emotion probably has its own unique somatic response pattern, and cite other theorists who argue that each has its own set of unique facial muscle movement patterns. Kleins exploits the physiological component of emotion supremely in the provocative book, Sentics. He formulates 7 principles for centric emotional communication, which pertain to centric states, a description given by Kleins to emotional states, largely to avoid the negative connotations associated with the emotional. Kleins emphasizes that emotions modulate our physical communication. The motor system acts as a carrier for communicating our centric state. Visceral and cognitive emotions. Humans are frequently conscious of their emotions, and we know from experience and laboratory study that cognitive assessment can precede the generation of emotions. Consequently, some have argued that cognitive appraisal is a necessary precondition for affective arousal. However, this view is refuted by the large amount of empirical evidence that affect can also be aroused without cognitive appraisal. DiMaggio's idea is that there are certain features of stimuli in the world that we respond to emotionally first, and which activate a corresponding set of feelings and cognitive state secondarily. Such emotions are primary and reside in the limbic system. He defines the secondary emotions as those that arise later in an individual's development when systematic connections are identified between primary emotions and categories of objects and situations. The body usually responds to emotion, although James's 1890 view of this response being the emotion is not accepted today. 3. Studies to associate bodily response with emotional state are complicated by a number of factors. For example, claims that people can experience emotions cognitively, such as love, without a corresponding physiological autonomic nervous system or response, such as increased heart rate, are complicated by issues such as the intensity of the emotion, the type of love, how the state was supposedly induced or watching a film, imagining a situation, and how the person was or was not encouraged to or express the emotion. Similar complications arise when trying to identify physiological responses which co-occur with emotional states. For example, heart rate also increases when exercising. Leidelmeier overviews several conflicting studies in 4, reminding us that a specific situation is not equally emotional for all people, and an individual will not be equally emotional in all situations. No one can read your mind. The experiments in identifying underlying centric state from observations of physical expression only need to demonstrate consistent patterning for an individual in a given perceivable context. The individual's personal computer can acquire ambient perceptual and contextual information, for example, see if you're climbing stairs, detect if the room temperature changed, etc., to identify autonomic emotional responses conditioned on perceivable non-emotional factors. Perceivable context should include not only physical media, but also cognitive media. For example, the information that this person has a lot invested in the stock market and may therefore feel unusually anxious as its index drops. The priorities of your agent could shift with your affective state. Emotional experience, expression, and state. Missing notes. Audio paper part 1 https://youtube.b/9ivjypjjh4 https://4/youtube.b/9ivjypjjh4 part 2 https://youtube.b/lspufarcday part 3 https youtube.b/lspufarcday https://youtube.b/fmhlhc0yy https://youtube.b/fmhlhc0yy Paper Embodied Conversational Agents Introduction AI Embodied Conversational Agent Ref https://ivislab.org/ivislab/ivislab.org/ivislab/ivislab.org/ivislab/human/only humans communicate using language and carry on conversations with one another. And the skills of conversation have developed in humans in such a way as to exploit all of the unique affordances of the human body. We make complex representational gestures with our prehensile hands, gaze away and towards one another out of the corners of our centrally set eyes, and use the pitch and melody of our voices to emphasize and clarify what we are saying. Perhaps because conversation is so defining of humanness and human interaction, the metaphor of face-to-face conversation has been applied to human-computer interface design for quite some time. One of the early arguments for the utility of this metaphor gave a list of features of face-to-face conversation that could be applied fruitfully to human-computer interaction, including mixed initiative, non-verbal communication, sense of presence, rules for transfer of control, Nickerson 1976. However, although these features have gained widespread recognition, human-computer conversation has only recently become more than a metaphor. That is, just lately have designers taken the metaphor seriously enough to attempt to design computer interfaces that can hold up their end of the conversation, interfaces that have bodies and know how to use them for conversation, interfaces that realize conversational behaviors as a function of the demands of dialogue and also as a function of emotion, personality, and social convention. This book addresses the features of human-to-human conversation that are being implemented in this new genre of embodied conversational agents, and the models and functions of conversation that underlie the features. Good written example. One way to think about the problem that we face is to imagine that we succeed beyond our wildest dreams in building a computer that can carry on a face-to-face conversation with a human. Imagine, in fact, a face-to-face Turing test. That is, imagine a panel of judges challenged to determine which socialite was a real live young woman, and which was an automaton, as in Hoffman's The Sandman. Or rather, perhaps to judge which screen was a part of a video conferencing setup, displaying the human being filmed in another room, and which screen was displaying an autonomous embodied conversational agent running on a computer. In order to win at this Turing test, what underlying models of human conversation would we need to implement, and what surface behaviors would our embodied conversational agent need to display? Solution idea. The chapters assembled here demonstrate the breadth of models and behaviors necessary to natural conversation. For models, in particular, that inform the production of conversational behaviors are employed by the authors in this volume, and those are emotion, personality, performatives, and conversational function. All of these models are proposed as explanatory devices for the range of verbal and non-verbal behaviors seen in face-to-face conversation, and therefore implemented in embodied conversational agents, ECAs. In what follows, I examine these non-verbal behaviors in depth, as background to the underlying models presented in each chapter. But first, I describe briefly the nature of the models themselves. Several authors address the need for models of personality in designing ECAs. In the work of Andre et al. Chap. 8, where two autonomous characters carry on a conversation that users watch, characters with personality make information easier to remember because the narration is more compelling. Their characters, therefore, need to be realized as distinguishable individuals with their own areas of expertise, interest profiles, personalities, and audiovisual appearance, taking into account their specific task in a given context. Each character displays a set of attitudes and actions, consistent over the course of the interaction, and revealed through the character's motions and conversations and interactions with the user and with other characters. I gaze the eyes play an important role in nonverbal communication, and such things as looking, staring, and blinking are important nonverbal behaviors. When people encounter people or things that they like, the rate of blinking increases and pupils dilate. Eye gaze camera or technology tracks a person's eye movements, which then moves the mouse on a computer screen. Gaze the key. Interactive keys to enhance gaze-based typing experience is also an important feature of nonverbal conversational behavior. Its main functions are 1. To help regulate the flow of conversation. That is, to signal the search for feedback during an interaction, a gazing at the other person to see whether he or she follows. 2. To signal the search for information, a looking upward as one searches for a particular word. To express emotion, looking downward in case of sadness. Or 3. To indicate personality characteristics, staring at a person to show that one won't back down. Beatty 1981. Duncan 1974. At the level of the turn, the hands being in motion is one of the most robust cues to turn-taking. Castle et al. Chap. 2. Duncan 1974. Speakers bring their hands into gesture space as they think about taking the turn, and at the end of a turn the hands of the speaker come to rest, before the next speaker begins to talk. Temporal integration, then, is key to the interpretation of gesture in the context of speech. Gestures that are mistimed will lead listeners in human conversation to misinterpret who has the turn, and or what is intended to be said. Timing is just as important to ECAs, and the issue of how to time graphical to speech output is a difficult one. It is natural to wonder about the cultural specificity of gesture use. We often have the impression that Italians gesture more and differently than do British speakers. It is true that, as far as the question of quantity is concerned, Speakers from some language communities demonstrate a greater number of gestures per utterance than others. This phenomenon appears to be linked to the fact that some cultures may embrace the use of gesture more than others. Many segments of British society believe that gesturing is inappropriate, and therefore children are encouraged to not use their hands when they speak. But the effect of these beliefs and constraints about gesture is not as strong as one might think. In my experience videotaping people carrying on conversations and telling stories, many speakers claim that they never use their hands. These speakers are then surprised to watch themselves on video, where they can be seen gesturing. In fact, every speaker of every language that I have seen videotaped, French, Spanish, Italian, Tagalog, Soviet Georgian, Chinese, Japanese, to name a few, has gestured. That is, all except for one American man who made one single gesture during his entire 20-minute narration, a gesture that he himself aborted by grabbing the gesturing hand with the other hand and forcefully bringing it down to his lap. As far as the nature of gesture is concerned, as mentioned above, emblems do vary widely from language community to language community. Americans make a V for victory, with their palm oriented either out toward the listener or toward themselves. For British speakers, the V for victory, with the palm oriented toward the self, is exceedingly rude. Italian speakers demonstrate a wide variety of emblematic gestures that can carry meaning in the absence of speech, while both American and English speakers have access to a limited number of such gestures. But remember that emblematic gestures still make up less than 20% of the gestures found in everyday conversation. The four types of spontaneous gestures described, however, appear universal. Interestingly, and perhaps not surprisingly, the form of metaphoric gestures appears to differ from language community to language community. Conduit metaphoric gestures are not found in narrations in all languages. Neither Chinese nor Swahili narrators use them. For example, a McNeill 1992. These narratives do contain abundant metaphoric gestures of other kinds, but do not depict abstract ideas as bounded containers. The metaphoric use of space, however, appears in all narratives collected, regardless of the language spoken. Thus, apart from emblematic gestures, the use of gesture appears to be more universal than particular. Nevertheless, the ways in which hand gestures and other nonverbal behaviors are produced do certainly differ from culture to culture. And as Nass, Isbister, and Lee Chap 13 show, cultural identification in ECAs is important to users' estimation of their abilities. This topic remains, then, an important one for future research. We can convey multiple communicative goals via the same communicative behaviors or by different communicative behaviors carried out at the same time. What makes this possible is the fact that we have at our disposal a number of modalities that can overlap without disruption. For example, a speaker can add a certain tone to the voice while raising the eyebrows to elicit feedback in the form of a head nod from the listener, all without interrupting the production of content. The use of several different modalities of communication, such as hand gestures, facial displays, eye gaze, and so forth, is what allows us to pursue multiple goals in parallel, some of a propositional nature, and some of an interactional nature. It is important to realize that even though speech is prominent in conveying content in face-to-face conversation, spontaneous gesture is also integral to conveying propositional content. In fact, speech and gesture are produced simultaneously, and take on a form that arises from one underlying representation, a Castle, Chap. 1. McNeill 1992. What gets conveyed through speech, and what gets conveyed through gesture, are therefore a matter of a particular surface structure taking shape. For interactional communicative goals, the modality chosen may be more a function of what modality is free. For example, is the head currently engaged in looking at the task, or is it free to give a feedback nod? The 13th of February 2021 embodied conversational agent. One of the early arguments for the utility of this metaphor gave a list of features of face-to-face conversation that could be applied fruitfully to human-computer interaction, including mixed initiative, nonverbal communication, sense of presence, rules for transfer of control, Nickerson 1976. Many of the authors in this volume discuss conversational function as separate from speech acts, emotion, and personality. Castle et al. Chap. 2 propose a model of conversational function. In general terms, all conversational behaviors in the FMEB conversational model must support conversational functions, and any conversational action in any modality may convey several communicative goals. In this framework, 4 features of conversation are proposed as key to the design of embodied conversational agents. The distinction between propositional and interactional functions of conversation. The use of several conversational modalities, such as speech, hand gestures, facial expression. The importance of timing among conversational behaviors, and the increasing cotemporality, or synchrony among conversational participants. The distinction between conversational behaviors, such as eyebrow raises, and conversational functions, such as turn-taking. Facial displays are linked to all of the underlying models mentioned above and described in this book. That is, facial displays can be realized from the interactional function of speech, raising eyebrows to indicate attention to the other's speech, emotion, wrinkling one's eyebrows with worry, personality, pouting all the time, performatives, eyes wide while imploring, and other behavioral variables, Picard 1998. Facial displays can replace sequences of words. She was dressed to wrinkle nose, stick out tongue too, as well as accompany them, Ekman 1979, and they can help disambiguate what is being said when the acoustic signal is degraded. They do not occur randomly, but rather are synchronized to one's own speech or to the speech of others, Condon and Austin 1971. Kennon 1972. Eye gaze is also an important feature of nonverbal conversational behavior. Its main functions are 1. To help regulate the flow of conversation. That is, to signal the search for feedback during an interaction, gazing at the other person to see whether he or she follows. 2. To signal the search for information, looking upward as one searches for a particular word. To express emotion, looking downward in case of sadness. Or 3. To indicate personality characteristics, staring at a person to show that one won't back down. BT 1981. Duncan 1974. For the construction of embodied conversational agents, then, there are types of gestures and facial displays that can serve key roles. In natural human conversation, both facial displays and gesture add redundancy when the speech situation is noisy, give the listener cues about where in the conversation one is, and add information that is not conveyed by accompanying speech. For these reasons, facial display, gesture, and speech can profitably work together in embodied conversational agents. Thus, in the remainder of this chapter, I will introduce those nonverbal behaviors that are integrated with one another, with the underlying structure of discourse, and with models of emotion and personality. The 15th of February 2021 notes on embodied conversational agent 1. Although many kinds of gestures and a wide variety of facial displays exist, the computer science community until very recently has for the most part only attempted to integrate one kind of gesture and one kind of facial display into human computer interface systems, that is, emblematic gestures, for example, or things like a gesture, or putting one's palm out to mean stop, which are employed in the absence of speech, and emotional facial displays, for example, smiles, frowns, looks of puzzlement. But in building embodied conversational agents, we wish to exploit the power of gestures and facial displays that function in conjunction with speech. In natural human conversation, both facial displays and gesture have redundancy when the speech situation is noisy, give the listener cues about where in the conversation one is, and add information that is not conveyed by accompanying speech. For these reasons, facial display, gesture, and speech can profitably work together in embodied conversational agents. Thus, in the remainder of this chapter, I will introduce those nonverbal behaviors that are integrated with one another, with the underlying structure of discourse, and with models of emotion and personality. Mike's interlocutors are no more likely to remember his nonverbal behavior than he is, but they do register those behaviors at some level, and use them to form an opinion about what he said. As we will see below, kinds of gesture, emblems, propositional gestures, spontaneous gestures, beat gestures, imaginative video will be important to understand the kinds of gesture. Integration of gesture with spoken language, temporal integration of gesture, and speech, semantic integration, discourse integration, cultural differences, kinds of facial displays. Let us turn now to the use of the face during conversation. Like hand gestures, facial displays can be classified according to their placement with respect to the linguistic utterance and their significance in transmitting information. Scherer, 1980. When we talk about facial displays, we are really most interested in precisely timed changes in eyebrow position, expressions of the mouth, movement of the head and eyes, and gestures of the hands. For example, raised eyebrows and a smiling mouth is taken to be a happy expression, Ekman, and Friesen, 1984, while moving one's head up and down is taken to be a nod. Some facial displays are linked to personality and remain constant across a lifetime, A. Wide-eyed. Look. Some are linked to emotional state and may last as long as the emotion is felt with downcast eyes. During depression. And some are synchronized with the units of conversation and last only a very short time in eyebrow raises along with certain performatives, such as in full. Cultural differences, integration of verbal displays with spoken language, temporal synchronization, facial display occurrence. Planning. Planning eye movements correspond to the first phase of a turn, when speakers organize their thoughts. The speaker has a tendency to look away in order to prevent an overload of visual and linguistic information. On the other hand, during the execution phase, when speakers know what they are going to say, they look more often at listeners. For a short turn of a duration of less than 1.5 seconds, this planning look away does not occur, and the speaker and listener maintain mutual gaze. Comment. Accented or emphasized linguistic items are punctuated by head nods. The speaker may also look toward the listener at these moments. Eyebrow raises are also synchronized with pitch accents. Control. Some eye movements regulate the use of the communication channel and function as synchronization signals. That is, one may request a response from a listener by looking at the listener and suppress the listener's response by looking away. These behaviors occur primarily at the ends of utterances and at grammatical boundaries. When the speaker wants to give up the floor, she gazes at the listener at the end of the utterance. When the listener wants the floor, she looks at and slightly up at the speaker. Feedback. Facial behaviors may be used to elicit feedback and to give it. Speakers look toward listeners during grammatical pauses and when asking questions. And these glances signal requests for verbal or nonverbal feedback without turning the floor over to the listener. Listeners respond by establishing gaze with the speaker and or nodding. The feedback elicitation head movements are referred to as within-turn signals. If the speaker does not emit such a signal by gazing at the listener can still emit a back channel or feedback signal, which in turn will be followed by a continuation signal by the speaker. But the listener's behavior is dependent on the behavior of the speaker. One is much less likely to find feedback in the absence of a feedback elicitation signal. Duncan, 1974. In the description just given, facial behavior is described as a function of the turn-taking structure of a conversation rather than as a function of information structure. This is the way that facial behavior has been described in most literature. In fact, gaze behavior has come to represent the cue-to-turn organization, and has been described as if it were entirely predicted by turn organization. Audio paper. Part 1. 1 https://u2.b/ox1 aco9u9z4 https://u2.b/ox1 aco9u9z4 part 2 https://u2.b/ox1 aco9u9z4 https://u2.b/ox1 aco9u9z4 Paper, Measures of Emotion, a review by Iris B. Morse, University of Denver, Denver, CO, USA, Michael D. Robinson, North Dakota State University, Fargo, NU, USA. Self-report measures of emotion. Autonomic measures of emotion. Startle response magnitude as a measure of emotion. Brain states as a measure of emotion. Behavior as a measure of emotion. Paper, Affective Computing and Sentiment Analysis. The basic tasks of affective computing and sentiment analysis are emotion recognition and polarity detection. Although the former focuses on extracting a set of emotion labels, the latter is usually a binary classification task with outputs such as a positive versus negative, thumbs up versus thumbs down, or a like versus dislike. These two tasks are highly interrelated and interdependent to the extent that some sentiment categorization models, such as the hourglass of emotions, treat them as a unique task by inferring the polarity associated to a sentence directly from the emotions this conveys. In many cases, in fact, emotion recognition is considered a subtask of polarity detection. Polarity classification itself can also be viewed as a subtask of more advanced analyses. For example, it can be applied to identifying pro and con expressions that can be used in individual reviews to evaluate the pros and cons that influence the judgments of a product, and that make such judgments more trustworthy. Another instance of binary sentiment classification is agreement detection, that is, given a pair of affective inputs, deciding whether they should receive the same or differing sentiment-related labels. Complementary to binary sentiment classification is the assignment of degrees of positivity to the detected polarity or valence to the inferred emotions. If we make the assumption that the input under examination is opinionative and is about a single issue or item, challenging new tasks arise, such as subjectivity detection and opinion target identification. 14 The capability of distinguishing whether an input is subjective or objective, in particular, can be highly beneficial for a more effective sentiment classification. Moreover, a record can have a polarity without necessarily containing an opinion. For example, a news article can be classified into good or bad news without being subjective. A quick guide to sentiment analysis in Python using text blog Edureka. Paper, Affective Computing, Challenges by Rosalind W. Picard. A number of researchers around the world have built machines that recognize, express, model, communicate, and respond to emotional information, instances of affective computing. This article raises and responds to several criticisms of affective computing, articulating state-of-the-art research challenges, especially with respect to affect in human-computer interaction. Below are the challenges: sensing and recognizing emotion, affect modeling, emotion expression, ethics, utility of considering affect in HCA. Read more. https://1drv.ms/b/s mbx8ffoj_rzlbvskosypa equals now. https://1drv.ms/b/s mbx8ffoj_rzlbvskosypa equals now. Paper, Is Imitation Learning the Route to Humanoid Robots? By Stefan Schall. Imitation from the viewpoint of behavioral and cognitive sciences. Imitation from the viewpoint of neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience. Imitation from the viewpoint of robotics, artificial intelligence, and neural computation. Symbolic approaches to imitation learning. Inductive approaches to imitation learning. Imitation learning of novel behaviors. Several research projects have focused on imitation as a method of creating novel behaviors. Three major approaches can be distinguished. Learning a control policy directly. Learning from demonstrated trajectories. Model-based imitation learning. Is imitation learning the route to humanoid robots? In the introduction of this article, we appeal to a pragmatic view of imitation learning as a means to speed up learning in complex high-dimensional motor systems, such as humanoid robots. This view emerged from the lack of theories of motor learning that are able to work efficiently in high-dimensional spaces. Interestingly, the apparently simple idea of imitation opened a Pandora's box of important computational questions in perceptual motor control. None of the approaches described in this article could provide satisfying answers to questions of appropriate perceptual representations for imitation, motor representations, and the learning of these representations. However, consensus may be reached that research into imitation needs to include a theory of motor learning, of compact state action representations or movement primitives, and of the interaction of perception and action. It is likely that these three components cannot be studied in isolation. Perceptual representations serve motor representations facilitate perception, and learning provides the mutual constraints between them. Learning theories based on such reciprocal interactions are currently under investigation in Computational Neuroscience, 1886. On this view, instead of being an idiosyncratic research topic, imitation learning could be conceived of as a research strategy that channels investigations in computational motor control towards the important topic of action-perception coupling. Jeanette Vogue, Scaffolding and Imitation Learning, Human Learning Principles Transferred to Robots. Paper, Computers are Social Actors. Abstract. This paper presents a new experimental paradigm for the study of human-computer interaction. 5 experiments provide evidence that individuals' interactions with computers are fundamentally social. The studies show that social responses to computers are not the result of conscious beliefs that computers are human or human-like. Moreover, such behaviors do not result from users' ignorance or from psychological or social dysfunctions, nor from a belief that subjects are interacting with programmers. Rather, social responses to computers are commonplace and easy to generate. The results reported here present numerous and unprecedented hypotheses, unexpected implications for design, new approaches to usability testing, and direct methods for verification. Paper, Language Within Our Grasp by Giacomo Rizzolatti and Michael A. Arbid. In monkeys, the rostral part of ventral promotor cortex, area F5, contains neurons that discharge, both when the monkey grasps or manipulates objects, and when it observes the experimenter making similar actions. These neurons mirror neurons that appear to represent a system that matches observed events to similar, internally generated actions, and in this way forms a link between the observer and the actor. Transcranial magnetic stimulation and positron emission tomography PET experiments suggest that a mirror system for gesture recognition also exists in humans and includes Broca's area. We propose here that such an observation-execution matching system provides a necessary bridge from doing to communicating, as the link between actor and observer becomes a link between the center and receiver of each